Manafort has nothing to do with our campaign. But I tell you, I feel a little badly about it. They went back 12 years to get things that he did 12 years ago. You know, Paul Manafort worked for me for a very short period of time. He worked for Ronald Reagan. He worked for Bob Dole. He worked for John McCain, or his firm did. He worked for many other Republicans. He worked for me, what, for 49 days?
Doug McElway is outside the U.S. District Court in Washington. Doug with the latest.
Hi, Kimberly. What we're looking at here is sort of a slow-motion evolution of the irresistible force against the immovable object. We are looking at a massive collision, and it is happening before our very, very eyes. First of all, it is highly unusual, as you well know, in a white-collar crime case for somebody to be sent to jail in advance of his trial. Very rarely does that happen among white-collar criminals, but that's what happened here this morning. Paul Manafort taken into detention in advance of his trial date here in Washington, which will be happening in mid-September. He faces another trial in the Eastern District Court of Virginia just across the river in mid-August. It means that he is going to have to report to that trial while he is in detention here in the District of Columbia. It is an indication of the absolute determination of Robert Mueller to put some more scalps on his wall here, and he is seeking one out in Mr. Manafort. You've heard from President Trump and how he has been emboldened by the IG report yesterday. And while that's very, very separate from Mr. Mueller's investigation here, there is a lot of crossover, and a lot of that crossover is manifested in the person of Peter Strzok, who, as you will recall, was the lead investigator in the Mueller staff for the first 3 months as that investigation was forming, as the seminal elements of that investigation were being put into place. Peter Strzok was at the very centerpiece of all that before they uncovered his text messages and sent him on his way, although he's still employed by the FBI in the HR department, which has a lot to do with ethics, as we are well known of, not exactly a clear practitioner of the policy of ethics at the FBI. In addition to that, it's important to note, when we're looking at this mammoth collision which is underway right now, what Rudy Giuliani recently said. There has been a shift in the Trump defense, away from defense to offense. You saw that with the president's emboldened statement this morning. He is trying to shape this investigation in whatever way he can by going after Robert Mueller. I'm reminded of a statement that a Boston lawyer by the name of Harvey Silverglate said about Mr. Mueller. He is a defense attorney and a law professor in Boston, runs a website, or was instrumental in creating the website FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education. He had meetings many, many years ago with Mr. Mueller in regards to a defendant that he was representing. And he was struck by something that Mr. Mueller said at that time. It was, as he was gathered with his associates among the FBI, that any criticism of the FBI is a non-starter. That is a quote from Harvey Silverglate pertaining to Mr. Mueller. Any criticism of the FBI is a non-starter. In Mr. Silverglate's mindset, it's a statement as to the insular nature of the upper echelons of the FBI. Mr. Trump is trying to penetrate that line of thinking right now, and he's going to be going after Mr. Mueller in a big way, especially emboldened by this IG report, which came out yesterday. But as it now stands, Mr. I've forgotten his name now, the man who was just sentenced to jail is going to be in jail as of now, beginning today. He's not coming out of this courtroom, and there is a gag order in effect right now, so his attorney won't be speaking either. But he's in jail, and he won't be coming out until his trial.
All right, excellent. Doug, thank you so much. So, Doug making the point that this is, Chris, pretty much, unprecedented. It's at least highly unusual that someone would have their bail revoked, $10 million bond, this additional allegation of witness tampering, which could be quite problematic for Paul Manafort. Obviously, the judge already believing that there is some indicia, some credibility in terms of evidence proffered to suggest that, in fact, he might have done that. Yeah. And therefore, in an abundance of caution, a bail took place here. He's going to have to stay in there, absent some other extenuating circumstance until this goes to trial. And he has a separate legal matter as well in the Eastern District.
And it's just as rotten. The conduct is just as rotten as you can imagine. To have a federal judge, because as you know, to put a white-collar defendant into jail prior to no violent crime having occurred, that he is not considered a bodily danger to others, putting somebody like that in jail is not unprecedented, but it is like a whoa Nelly. And the whoa Nelly here is you got a guy who is, the judge found reason to believe that this is a guy who's tampering with witnesses in his own case. This is sleaze, this is corruption, this is the worst kind of stuff. And everybody knew Paul Manafort was a guy who played on the edges. When Donald Trump hired Paul Manafort to be his campaign chairman, when he brought him on board, everybody knew Paul Manafort's record for working with unsavory people overseas and doing bad stuff. And here we see the fullest fruit of that bad reputation.